Here's something that should terrify every single Blue Jays fan right now. Jazz Chisholm Jr. is available. The Yankees are listening to offers. Brian Cashman just went on record saying they're open-minded about trading him. And you know what the Blue Jays should do? Absolutely nothing. They should stay as far away from this trade as humanly possible, because acquiring Jazz Chisholm would be the most Toronto Blue Jays move imaginable, and I mean that in the worst way possible. They'd be trading for flash over substance, highlights over wins, and Instagram clips over championships. And before you tell me I'm being too harsh, let me break down exactly why Jazz Chisholm is the poster child for everything wrong with modern baseball evaluation. The Yankees just lost to the Blue Jays in the ALDS. Yeah, they got bounced in 4 games, and now they want to trade one of their supposedly core players. Think about that for a second. If Jazz Chisholm was really that valuable, if he was really the dynamic game changer everyone claims he is, why would the Yankees even consider moving him? They're a team with championship aspirations. They have one of the highest payrolls in baseball. They don't trade impact players unless there's a reason. And that reason is simple. Jazz Chisholm is overrated. He's all style and no substance. He's the kind of player who looks amazing in highlight reels but doesn't actually move the needle when it matters. Let's start with the numbers, because this is where it gets really damning. Chisholm hit .242 last season, .242. That's his batting average. For a guy who plays second base and is supposed to be an offensive catalyst, that's pathetic. His on-base percentage was .332. That means he's not getting on base at an acceptable rate for someone batting near the top of a championship lineup. Sure, he hit 31 home runs. Sure, he stole 31 bases. He's a 30-30 guy. But you know what else he is? A liability in every other aspect of the game. His strikeout rate is concerning. His plate discipline is questionable. His consistency is non-existent. This is a player who will go on hot streaks that make you think he's figured it out and then disappear for weeks at a time. That's not what championship teams are built on. And here's the part that really bothers me. Jazz Chisholm has a personality. He's got swagger. He's got style. He dyes his hair. He celebrates big. He talks to the media. And you know what? None of that matters if you're not producing when it counts. The Yankees love his personality. They love his energy. But you know what they love more? Winning. And if they think trading him gives them a better chance to win, then his personality isn't worth what everyone thinks it is. The Blue Jays would be acquiring him for all the wrong reasons. They'd be getting him because he's exciting, because he sells jerseys, because he creates buzz, not because he makes them better. That's backwards thinking, and it's exactly the kind of decision that keeps teams stuck in mediocrity. And let's talk about defense for a minute, because this is another area where the Jazz Chisholm hype train goes off the rails. He's supposedly a great defensive second baseman. Brian Cashman called him a great defender. But is he really? Or is he just athletic enough to make spectacular plays that end up on highlight shows? Because there's a massive difference between being a good defender and being a flashy defender. Good defenders make the routine play every single time. They position themselves correctly. They take proper angles. They don't make errors on balls they should handle. Flashy defenders dive for balls they should field standing up. They make everything look hard. They prioritize the spectacular over the fundamental. And from what I've watched, Jazz Chisholm falls into that second category far too often. The Yankees are also concerned about their lineup balance. They have too many left-handed hitters. And guess what Jazz Chisholm is? A left-handed hitter. So if the Blue Jays trade for him, they're not solving any problems. They're just creating new ones. Their lineup is already left-hand heavy. They already struggle against certain types of pitching. Adding another left-handed bat doesn't address those issues. It compounds them. But that won't stop the Blue Jays from convincing themselves that his power and speed make up for it. That's what they do. They find reasons to justify bad decisions instead of making the hard choice to pass on players who don't fit. Now let's address the elephant in the room. The Blue Jays have Bo Bichette. He's a free agent. The negotiations are complicated. And some analysts are already suggesting the Yankees could trade Jazz Chisholm and then sign Bo Bichette to replace him. Think about how insane that is. The Yankees are willing to dump Chisholm to get Bichette. They see Bichette as an upgrade. They recognize that despite all of Jazz's flash and style, Bo is the better player. And yet the Blue Jays are supposedly considering letting Bo walk while simultaneously exploring trades for Jazz. That's not a lateral move. That's a massive downgrade. That's organizational negligence disguised as being aggressive. Here's what makes this whole situation even more ridiculous. Jazz Chisholm is in his walk year. He's going to be a free agent after next season. So if the Blue Jays trade for him, they're not getting long-term control. They're getting 1 year. 1 year of a streaky, inconsistent player who puts up big numbers in meaningless situations and disappears when the games matter most. And what would they have to give up to get him? Prospects, young talent, the future, all for 1 year of Jazz Chisholm. That's not smart roster construction. That's desperation. That's panic. That's everything wrong with how the Blue Jays operate. The Yankees acquired Chisholm from the Marlins in 2024. They gave up 3 prospects to get him, and now less than 2 years later, they're willing to move him. What does that tell you? It tells you that up close, in the day-to-day grind of a season, Jazz Chisholm doesn't live up to the hype. The Yankees have seen him every single day. They've watched him in the clubhouse. They've seen how he handles adversity. They've evaluated his impact beyond the stats, and their conclusion is that he's expendable. That should be a massive red flag for any team considering trading for him, but it won't be, because teams always think they're smarter than everyone else. They always think they can fix what other teams couldn't. Let's talk about what the Blue Jays actually need, because this matters. They need starting pitching depth. They need reliable bullpen arms. They need defensive improvements in the outfield. They need right-handed power bats to balance their lineup. Jazz Chisholm addresses exactly 0 of those needs. 0. He's a left-handed hitting second baseman when they already have infield options. He doesn't pitch. He doesn't play outfield at an elite level. He doesn't balance anything out. He's literally the opposite of what they should be targeting. But he's available. He's got a big name. He'd generate headlines. And that's all the Blue Jays seem to care about anymore, making noise instead of making sense. Brian Cashman said the Yankees are open-minded about trading Chisholm, but that it would be hard to pull off because they like their players. Translation? We'll move him for the right price, but we're not desperate. The Yankees hold all the leverage here. They can keep him and hope he figures it out. They can trade him and upgrade at second base. Either way, they're fine. Meanwhile, any team that trades for him is taking on significant risk. They're betting that a player the Yankees are willing to part with is somehow going to be better for them than he was in New York. That's a losing bet more often than not. And here's the controversial take that nobody wants to hear. Jazz Chisholm's 30-30 season isn't as impressive as it sounds. 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases used to mean something. It used to be elite. But in today's game, with the way the ball flies and the way teams approach base stealing, it's not as rare anymore. Multiple players put up those numbers every year now. It's not the exclusive club it once was. And when you dig deeper into Chisholm's season, you see a lot of empty production, big numbers in blowouts, home runs when the game is already decided, stolen bases when it doesn't matter, the kind of stats that look good on Baseball Reference but don't actually translate to winning games. That's who Jazz Chisholm is. A stats compiler who gets praised for volume without anyone questioning the context. The Blue Jays are at a crossroads right now. They can either build intelligently for sustained success, or they can make splashy moves that generate headlines but don't improve the roster. Trading for Jazz Chisholm would firmly put them in that second category. It would be the classic Blue Jays move. Big name, big personality, big risk, and ultimately big disappointment, because the kind of player who gets traded in his walk year by a contending team is usually not the kind of player who transforms your franchise. He's the kind of player who looks good on paper, underwhelms in practice, and walks away in free agency, leaving you with nothing to show for what you gave up. There are reports that multiple second basemen could be moved this offseason. Ketel Marte, Brendan Donovan, Brandon Lowe, Jake Cronenworth, Jazz Chisholm. The market is flooded, and when the market is flooded, prices drop. So if the Blue Jays are determined to acquire a second baseman, why would they target the most volatile, least consistent option? Why not go after someone more stable, someone with a better track record, someone who actually fits what they need? The answer is simple. Because Jazz Chisholm has a name. He's recognizable. He trends on social media. And the Blue Jays care more about perception than reality. Let's also talk about what this trade would signal to the rest of the league. It would signal that the Blue Jays are desperate, that they're willing to overpay for players other teams don't value as highly as the market suggests, that they can be taken advantage of. And once other GMs know that, every negotiation becomes harder. Every price gets inflated. Every deal gets worse. The Blue Jays need to establish that they're not going to be the team that bails out the Yankees when New York decides a player isn't worth keeping. They need to have discipline. They need to have standards. They need to walk away from bad deals, even when the player involved is exciting. You know what the really sad part is? Jazz Chisholm wants to stay in New York. He said it himself. He doesn't want to leave. He loves playing for the Yankees. He wants to be there long term. But the Yankees aren't sure they want him. They're exploring trades. They're keeping their options open. And if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about his actual value versus his perceived value, I don't know what will. The team that has him doesn't want to commit. The player wants to stay, but the organization is lukewarm. That's not a ringing endorsement. That's a warning sign. The Blue Jays need to learn from their past mistakes. They've chased big names before. They've made splashy trades that looked great in the moment and aged terribly. They've convinced themselves that adding one more piece would put them over the top, only to discover that the piece didn't fit. Jazz Chisholm would be another example of that pattern. Another player acquired for the wrong reasons. Another trade that generates buzz but doesn't generate wins. Another move that looks good on paper but falls apart in reality. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And if the Blue Jays trade for Jazz Chisholm, they're proving that they've learned absolutely nothing from their past failures. Here's my prediction. The Yankees are going to find a trade partner for Jazz Chisholm. Some team is going to convince themselves they're getting a steal. Some GM is going to see the 30-30 season and ignore all the red flags. And it very well might be the Toronto Blue Jays, because that's what they do. They chase the shiny objects. They make the moves that get people talking. They prioritize headlines over winning. And in 2 years, when Jazz Chisholm is playing somewhere else after a disappointing stint in Toronto, we'll all look back at this moment and wonder why nobody had the courage to say what needed to be said, that he wasn't worth it, that the warning signs were obvious, that trading for him was a mistake from the moment it was proposed. But by then, it'll be too late. The damage will be done. The prospects will be gone. And the Blue Jays will be right back where they started, looking for the next big name to chase instead of building a roster the right way. And that's the real tragedy here. Not that Jazz Chisholm is available, but that the Blue Jays are probably going to be dumb enough to trade for him.